Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul, hopefully having an amazing day. With the 10th generation of GeForce cards, Nvidia struck gold. Pascal was very well received, of course, and the question is, can Lovelace mirror this achievement? Well, the answer may actually be yes. Yesterday we covered a benchmark with Time Spy Extreme and the results were very impressive. But today we're going to be discussing a benchmark for a game, Control, and then we're going to get into some other RTX 40 updates, and we're going to get right into it after this message from the video's sponsor.
If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by WhoKeys.com, and they've an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as Home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out WhoKeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices.
So AGF on Twitter states that they received a first game score for the AD102 with high power draw. We'll get into that in just a second. The result here was Control, with ultra settings with 4K ray tracing and DLSS. Now, the game here reached over 160 FPS. Now, the only negative is that they didn't know what benchmark or test system was being run. So what we don't know, for example, is the portion of the game that was being tested. But Hassan over at WCCF Tech, I'll leave a link to his tweet as well, actually did some nice comparisons with various Nvidia graphics cards. The bottom line here is that we are looking at over a 2 times gain for the full AD102. Now, I want to stress this is almost certainly the RTX 4090 Ti. This is not the RTX 4090, so there is definitely a upgrade in performance compared to the 4090, which seems to be released this year, and the 4090 Ti seems to be scheduled for next year. I also want to add that I have been hearing some rumors that it won't actually be called the 4090 Ti. Instead, perhaps it could be end up as, the Titan cards, but frankly, I'm not too convinced that this is the case. I suspect that they may want to release both a 4090 Ti as well as a Titan, maybe with difference in memory configuration or something like that. Now, I want to stress that, of course, this benchmark could be inaccurate. However, it does seem to match pretty much what you would expect from an RTX 4090 or 4090 Ti card based upon all of the projected performance results that we've seen thus far. Basically speaking, these cards are just going to be absolutely ridiculously fast. And I think that we're going to be in a situation where if you're willing to just have ray tracing disabled, and you can run most games with DLSS off at well over 130, 140, 150, maybe even 200 frames a second. But with titles with ray tracing enabled and DLSS utilized, I think we're going to get frame rates that are absolutely just ridiculous. Now, I will be interested to see whether DLSS 3 does make an appearance with RTX 40. I am told that Nvidia will release it, and I've discussed it ad nauseum on the channel before, but basically, just a quick reminder, it has improvements in performance, improvements in visual quality, but the question is, will it launch simultaneous to RTX 40? Will it launch, later maybe, or even possibly earlier? I don't think it will launch earlier, and that also brings an obvious question. Does DLSS 3 require some of the architectural changes of RTX 40, so perhaps it won't be as impressive, maybe? I mean, I don't know if the Nvidia would want to do diverging code paths, so maybe, for example, the visual improvements aren't as good with RTX 20 series. Who knows, honestly, there's a lot of speculation. Now, let's talk about the power utilization here, because they mentioned, again, high power draw for the AGF tweet. Unfortunately, they didn't exactly provide clarification to what this meant, I assume this would be in reference to that the full AD102 implementation was well over 600 watts, and there were some rumours, and I discussed them myself several times over, that the overclocked variants could be hitting well over 700 or even 800 watts, so perhaps that's what's being discussed here. I also want to add just a little bit of my own information to the RTX 40 info. One of my sources actually yesterday told me that AIBs are now starting to test this. Now, as far as I understand it, the drivers are still very, very, very locked down. So what does this mean by locked down? Well, basically it means that the majority of titles, software just simply will not work because Nvidia just doesn't want tons of leaks. So basically, internally in the labs, they have a bit more freedom and flexibility, but for AIBs, the only thing they really can do is run a few benchmarks. But I was told by one individual that some AIBs are already starting to optimize, and I was told that they can actually hit 2.8 to 3.1 gigahertz. Now, this, from what I understand, is based upon the scene in Time Spy Extreme. So basically, these are the boost frequencies. The card was hitting up to 520 watts, but most likely the memory was also overclocked, which is GDDR6. Now, they really stress that, this is probably not going to be achievable by the majority of silicon, and probably this is going to be silicon which is relegated to Halo cards, assuming this is true. Either way, though, the result here is absolutely ridiculous. I was told that we're looking at a score of around 25 to 26,000, but that is graphics score. Again, I'm not certain whether this is the case or not, because that does seem a very high result, given the benchmark that we discussed just yesterday was only hitting, well, basically not over 19,000 for Time Spy Extreme. And now I want to discuss L2 cache for RTX 40, because things start to get quite interesting. So Copty7 on Twitter actually mentions that we need to keep an eye, on the amount of L2 cache on GPUs, although he mentions at this point that he can't say too much. I decided to do some digging with some of my sources, and basically, you may recall that Nvidia received a hack, and, well, 96 megabytes was actually the full implementation of AD102, at least according to that hack, and my source actually mentions that this still seems to be the case. But curiously, there does seem to be 2 versions minimum of AD102 being tested when it comes to the amount of L2 cache. The first, just to repeat exactly what I said a moment ago, is 96 megabytes, but the other one has actually been cut. Not exactly massively, but it has been cut, I was told, to 72 megabytes of L2. Now, it's very possible that the confusion here is possibly the 96 megabytes is the full AD102 die, and, the 70-odd megabyte one is not. Maybe it's the RTX 4090 level die. Perhaps it's something like Nvidia are testing things for yield purposes. Obviously, the bottom line is I do not have a block diagram of the RTX 4090. I do not have access to any Lovelace silicon to do any benchmarks. My prediction is, though, that this would make quite a profound ramification to the overall bandwidth on the GPU. And I would imagine, and again, I say this with complete ignorance because I do not have access to the silicon, but I would imagine that this would have a greater ramification to ray tracing performance. I'm going to be very interested to see how all of this ends up, because it could also perhaps actually, thinking about it, going back to what I mentioned about the results of my own Time Spy Extreme with the optimized clock frequency that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Perhaps that's why that result is higher than the TSE results that Copty7 mentioned, or at least significantly higher. Maybe there were some variances in the cache. So it's going to be very interesting, honestly, how all of this shapes up. With that said, guys, I'm going to let you all go. I am feeling a little better today, but I'm still not 100%. That's why I'm not on camera right now, because I kind of look like death. not least of which helped by the fact that the temperatures at the moment are absolutely ridiculous across the UK. I hope you're all doing well, and I will see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.